Franklin Civil War Roundtable. Of course, it's your host again, Jeff Williams. Our speaker today is going to be Stephen Thomas talking about the connections of the Medal of Honor to Tennessee history. So we'll get started here in just a second, so stay tuned. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Dig it.
All right, make sure there's anybody else. Okay, we'll get started. All righty, how's everybody doing today? Awesome, thank you so much. Did y'all get caught in the rain today? Okay. I did. I drenched on the way back from a tour, so I'm dried out now. Don't worry about it. Thank y'all again so much for coming out to the Franklin Civil Roundtable. See some familiar faces. See some folks I haven't seen before. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Jeff Williams. Kind of taking over as the host from Greg. Thank you, Greg, for showing up today. Appreciate that. It's good to see you. Something kind of a little bit different that kind of want to try out. We have these great little booklets here called the Great American Documents. And with next year being the 250th anniversary of the American War of Independence, the Declaration of Independence, we thought this would be a good thing to kind of give away as a little prize for a trivia thing. So for the trivia question, and hopefully some of y'all might know this, and we'll do it on a who raises their hand first. So there is a person of the McGavick family that makes a connection between here at Carnton and also historic Belmead in Nashville. Does anybody know who that person is? If you know the answer. A person of the McGavick family makes a connection to the family at Belmead in Nashville. No answers? We will try next week. Don't worry, it'll be a different question. So hopefully next week we'll have a chance to win this Great American Document, and you'll also learn to read your emails a little bit more closely, okay? All right, so I'm going to introduce our first speaker today, our only speaker today. Stephen Thomas. He is a friend of mine. I've known him for a while. We've come a long way since taking classes at MTSU and Dr. Hunt's Civil War class. Stephen Thomas is a native of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and a graduate of Middle Tennessee State University, where he earned a Bachelor of Arts in History with a concentration in war, policy, and society. He brings a strong background in public history and interpretation, having served a prominent historic sites such as Oakland's Mansion in Murfreesboro and Belmead Plantation in Nashville. During his time at Belmead, Thomas created the Journey to Jubilee Tour, a groundbreaking tour in Nashville that explores the experiences of African Americans during and after enslavement. Within its first year, the tour became the site's second most popular offering and continues to be featured today. Thomas joined the Coolidge National Medal of Honor Heritage Center in Chattanooga, the birthplace of the Medal of Honor, in October 2019 as Director of Program Support. In that role, he supported both the Education and Collections departments and developed the American Identity Tour, which educates visitors on the core values embodied by Medal of Honor recipients: patriotism, citizenship, courage, integrity, sacrifice, and commitment. Now serving as Director of Operations, Thomas leads the Heritage Center staff, cultivates community and institutional partnerships, and works to ensure the center remains a powerful and relevant resource for both local residents and visitors from across the country. Today he's going to be talking about the connection of the Medal of Honor, its history, and to Tennessee's history as well. So please welcome Stephen Thomas.
Thanks, buddy. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Jeff, thank you so much for that introduction. And we have come a long way, crying in the middle of Peck Hall, going, why does he have to make us do all this reading? Why? Well, this is why, right? It's a chance for me to be able to stand in front of you folks and share the stories of individuals that have received the highest award for military valor in our nation's history. But where does it come from? right? This idea of military awards in the United States military, it was seen as something very taboo very early on. You know, when Washington is forming the Continental Army, you know, the premier the awards that you see most often are with British officers. Think of any European officer portrait that you have ever seen in your life. It is likely that the officer has some kind of sash on him. He has medals. I mean, think of the King of England today, right? You know, he's got medals on, sashes on, but has he ever served himself breakfast a day in his life, right? It's a joke. It's a joke. But, you know, this idea is a very old world European way of military, right? This aristocracy that came out of the British military, you know, you aren't going to achieve an officer class rank unless you come from a place of privilege, right? Now, Washington, even though he was not considered British, he was born in the colonies, he wanted to be a British officer so bad, and he realized that there was only so far that he could go because he was not considered British, right? Which I think led him to be okay with leading the Continental Army. He might have been a little bitter towards the British, but he is actually going to institute the very first wearable award for the United States military, right? But this is where it's going to be something completely different than the European armies. He's going to focus on the common soldier, right? So, because he understood that the officers are just taking credit for what those men are doing and what they are accomplishing. So those awards that those British officers are getting were on the backs of the common soldier, okay? Now, Washington, when he's developing this award, he chooses this color purple very specifically. Why? To give you context, in this time period, in the colonies, if you were wearing this color and are not part of the royal family, you were more than likely going to be executed, right? Now, this award only ever goes to 3 men and their involvement in the capturing of Andre, right? Now, what he is saying to the king in a very thumbing of his nose fashion is that these men, they serve other people. They serve others that are not kings. That's what makes them kings. That's why they get to wear this color, right? Because it all boils back down to service, okay? That there's a thread going from the beginning all the way to now, and it goes through service, and it propels forward through the act of love in service, right? Now, these early military awards, they all lived inside the conflict in which they were created. This is the Certificate of Merit. It would have, it's not really necessarily for combat. Soldiers would receive this certificate, but it's not, again, wearable, right? You can put it up on your wall when you get home after your service, but it's not something that you can wear proudly, right? Now, as we're leading up to 1860, right? As we are gaining more territory out west, the argument of free state, slave state is just tearing the country apart, right? We're killing each other. Lots of violence is happening. And it's all belligerence that is going to continue to push that forward, right? All of the secessionists in the South, they're trying to gain ground, right? And by 1860, right, you have the country is ready to rip itself apart, okay? Now Lincoln, while he was an abolitionist president, he believed in abolition. He did not want to run as on the platform of getting rid of slavery completely, because he understood that if he tried to do that, he could not build that more perfect union. And that became his narrative throughout his campaign, right? He's not wanting to break apart the Union. He's trying to keep it whole so he can make it better, right? But with the belligerents in the South, the aristocracy funding the rebellion, right? Because remember, what was this war called when it was originally being fought? War of the Rebellion of 1861. And I get it all the time. It wasn't a rebellion. Well, if it wasn't, then why did they have a rebel yell and call themselves rebels? Right? So we got to understand it within that context, because otherwise Lincoln is out of line if he's sending troops to the South, right? Now, he's not at that point yet. It won't be until after these states already start issuing their articles of secession, right? Now, all of the articles of secession are going to state that the reason they are leaving, right? The reason that the majority of these states are leaving is because they feel they are going to lose control of the institution of slavery, which is tied directly to their economy, right? So, as we start pushing into and getting closer, there's weird messages that just kind of come out of nowhere, right? And for the first shots to be fired at Fort Sumter, they're being shot by someone that's not even in the Confederate Army at the time, right? He was a pretty well-known secessionist in South Carolina, Mr. Edwin Ruffin over there, right? He looks like a shady enough character to do it. Now, here's the other side of it, right? Because I get people all the time that will say, well, Lincoln should have just removed the troops from the fort and it wouldn't have been a problem. I mean, that's fair to say, but let me change the context for you. Let's say you're at a forward operating base in Afghanistan, and the newest terrorist organization has just formed, and they're wanting to take over what they consider as their land, and they're knocking on the gate. Hey, it's time for you guys to leave. Now, is the 82nd Airborne supposed to leave? No. So for Lincoln to leave his troops at the fort was very intentional, because it's a federal fort. It's not South Carolina's property if it's being operated and manned by the United States Army, right? But after those first shots and those soldiers and those volunteers are being drawn up and being sent to the South, the Navy has already started putting together plans by December of 1861. They're going to be the first branch to have a Medal of Honor authorized for the branch. Now, the Navy, even today, they still use the original 19th century symbolism in the medal. They didn't change this design at all. Whereas other parts of the medal have changed over the years, that one has stayed very, very true. And I'd like to point out some of the symbolism. It doesn't show up very well in here. I hope you can see it. But the symbolism itself actually shows us why this medal was created, right? Why it exists. Right here you have the goddess Minerva, goddess of wisdom and of war, right? She is carrying a shield with the coat of arms for the United States, and she is expelling this man. This man represents discord, and the snakes in his hands are poisonous ideas, right? So what is the poisonous idea that's in the discord that Lincoln wants to use the medal to push out of the United States? Secession, right? Because again, the aristocracy in the South, including the Confederate leadership, believed that they were the carriers of the founders' original vision, right? If the founders didn't want slavery in our very fabric of our existence, why would they have written it into our documents, right? But Lincoln's point of view and the way he took his narrative is to build a more perfect union. You can't rip it apart, right? You're destroying something before you have a chance to actually see what it can become, all right? So, this medal should not have existed past 1865, according to the trend leading up to that point, right? Now, for the Civil War, over 2,000 medals are going to be awarded for actions during the conflicts, or during the conflict. But by 1917, there's probably going to be about 600 less from the Civil War, okay? In 1917, they did what was known as the Great Purge. They started adding value to what is valor, and they started applying those standards to the previous citations as well, right? And I'll get on to some of the examples of who those folks might have been here in a little bit. But as you start getting through the war, or getting closer to the main army fighting of the war, excuse me, I'll get out here in a second. You have something that goes on that starts here in Middle Tennessee. It actually starts right outside of Shelbyville. You have several Ohio volunteer infantry regiments that are posted around Shelbyville, in between Shelbyville and Murfreesboro as well. And there's a gentleman by the name of James Andrews, who is a civilian smuggler, right? He is not one of those citizens that you would walk up to and go, he's got some good value to him, right? Like, he was seen as a shady character. He was known on both sides of the Mason-Dixon line as a smuggler, right? He used that to his advantage. He would deliver intelligence to the northern generals while delivering false intelligence to the southern generals, right? Now, one evening he approaches General Buell while he is in Shelbyville and says, I think I have a plan that we can stop the war before it even starts. Okay, this will go on to become known as the Great Locomotive Chase. All right. Now, James Andrews will spend the next 2 days gathering up as many volunteers as he can. And he ends up with 22 volunteers. Okay. The youngest is Jacob Parrott. He is actually 17 years old at the time. His birthday is a month away from when he volunteered to do this mission. But the oldest is, he's actually in his late 50s when he volunteers, okay? So wide range. And all of these men are going to dress in civilian clothing, and they're going to sneak down to as close to Atlanta as they can get, which they end up in Marietta. They choose Marietta. And they're dressed in civilian clothes, leaving in pairs, going down. Now, there were some hiccups along the way. A couple of guys were picked up for desertion by the Confederate Army, and then there was some confusion. They were like, no, we're not deserting, we're going to sign up. So these two guys ended up having to join the Confederacy for a little while before they had to try to sneak away. There was a couple of guys that overslept. They never made it. They didn't actually make the event. But 19 of those 22 men are actually going to end up participating in this event. So they sneak down to Marietta. They are on a train known as the General, and it was actually stopping at a bed and breakfast long enough for the engineer and the rest of the crew to eat before moving on. They were heading up to Chattanooga, right? Now, this was all being coordinated so that Buell can meet James in Chattanooga at the same time, right? So James could have a nice, friendly city to arrive at, right? Unfortunately, things did not go as planned. As they are making their way down to Marietta, it is raining. It's been raining for the past 3 days, and it's been heavy torrential rain for them. So once the day arrives that they steal the train, the rain let up, but all of the tinder is soaking wet still. So as they're trying to drive the train northward to Chattanooga, they're planning strategic stops so they can tear up railroad tracks, so they can cut telegraph wire, and they can burn bridges, right? They get all the way to Ringgold, Georgia, which is just outside of Chattanooga. I mean, you're on rail, you're just about 15 minutes away, right? Maybe 20. When they ran out of steam at the Ringgold Tunnel, right? This magnificent tunnel, they were strategic in that they stopped the train in the middle of near the end of the tunnel so other trains couldn't try to get through, right? They all scatter. Unfortunately, all of them are captured. Right? Even the guys that overslept were eventually captured by the Confederates. Now, James Andrews and 7 other of the raiders, and they were all chosen because of their rank. They were all the NCOs and older NCOs of the volunteers. Andrews was made an example of and was actually tried and was found guilty of being a spy, right? So he is taken to Atlanta. He is about a mile outside of the city. He is executed by hanging. And then they dismembered his body and buried him in an unmarked grave, right? That's actually something that an enslaved blacksmith that worked right across the street from where the execution took place, he was watching the execution take place, and he reported it back to the officials that were taking accounts after the war was over. That's how they were able to find James and the other raiders' remains to have them reburied in Chattanooga. But the other 7 men are all executed at the same time while the remaining raiders are watching. None of the other raiders saw what happened to Andrews. And for one of the, Marion Ross was actually the first sergeant for one of the companies of the Ohio Volunteer Regiments. He is rather large for the time period. I mean, he's a bigger man, right? He's a little bit taller. He's about 6 foot, and he weighs about 200 pounds. When they dropped the bottom out of him, when he was being hung, his toes were on the ground. So it didn't break his neck. It didn't kill him. It just strangled him. He passed out from strangulation. Now, the Confederates, they were very happy to oblige it again and woke him up, shortened the rope, and did it again right then while everybody was watching, right? Now, William Pittenger, who goes on to write the book, The Great Locomotive Chase, that Disney then turns into a movie from the 60s with the famous Fez Parker, who was in every Disney movie at that time, I think, I've been told. But he actually penned 2 separate letters to President Davis. He was asking, he's asking for his release, right? But it's very stern in what he is saying. He's almost begging him to release the remaining prisoners because he doesn't want to be executed, right? Now, this is oftentimes when I start talking about this idea that we have in our heads of Medal of Honor recipients being heroes, right? Which they are. I'm not saying that they're not, but if you only hold on to that image of them, you lose that human element and see that this is a kid. He is a 20-year-old kid who is terrified. He is scared for his life, and he's trying to find a way to save him and his buddies, right? He swore that they would never take up arms against the Confederacy for the remainder of their days. They lied, right? So eventually the Confederates release out of the remaining raiders, the majority of them eventually escaped. As the Union armies are moving, they're taking ground, these prisoners are having to be shifted around, and their documentation doesn't really keep up with them. Their reputation doesn't really keep up with them. People forget who they are. And so finally, Jacob Parrott, William Pittenger, and 4 others are going to be released and exchanged for prisoners. Now, as soon as they're being exchanged, William Stanton telegraphs to have Parrott come to D.C. immediately. And because he had heard reports of how he was treated as a prisoner. And when Parrott arrived, he sat down with Stanton for about 2.5 hours in his office discussing the condition of his imprisonment. He was lashed over 100 times as the Confederates were trying to get information out of him because he was the youngest. They were targeting the youngest of all of them to try to get as much information as possible, and he didn't give any. Now, Stanton is actually going to bestow the very first Medal of Honor to Jacob Parrott in that moment. But that's not how Lincoln wants that moment in history to be remembered, because that was the beginning of a tradition that Stanton took away from Lincoln. See, Congress approves the medal. It's the president that has the privilege. It's not his, he doesn't get to have a say. He just signs the document and hands the award or puts the award around the individual's neck. So after this happened, Stanton got chewed out a little bit, and then all of the raiders that were exchanged were brought in. And so the first 6 Medal of Honor recipients were the Andrews Raiders, as I call them, right? Jacob Parrott being the very first, right? Now, Parrott is a very quiet individual. Like he doesn't really do much after the war. He's very prominent in the GAR reunions and the different meetings that are taking place, but he never really seeks out any kind of fame from this event in his life. But William Pittenger, who wrote the book, The Great Locomotive Chase. Depending on which edition you have, it could be the 1st through the 13th edition, there's so many different things that get altered and changed in that story that he turns himself into the very first Medal of Honor recipient. And that's how it is depicted in the movie that Disney created in the 1960s, right? So what is the national story, right? Well, Chattanooga is the birthplace of the Medal of Honor because within a 25-mile radius of our location downtown, the first 54 actions took place to warrant the Medal of Honor, right? That includes men like William Carson, who never picked up a rifle to receive his Medal of Honor. He was a bugler. So he ran the length of about a mile of his front at the Battle of Chickamauga, and he is blowing a bugle call to the colors. To the colors. It's all to consolidate because as the Confederates are advancing onto the Federal position, they don't have very good cover. They don't have any real defense to set up. So they start breaking up and they start finding cover. That's not how it's going to save the day. So Carson, as he's running this mile for the next 25 to 30 minutes, he's got two outcomes that come out of it. The first one is that he confused the Confederates. They thought reinforcements had arrived because they hear this bugle call up and down this front. They slow their halt down almost, or slow their advance down almost to a halt. And this gave the federal leadership time to organize the retreat back to Chattanooga, which would give them a better defense anyway. Now, unfortunately, Carson is captured and will serve 6 months as a prisoner of war, but is released and just goes home, right? Also, among those 54 is the first and currently only female Medal of Honor recipient, Dr. Mary Edwards Walker. Now, Dr. Walker, before the war, she's an abolitionist. Even before the war, she was considered a radical in a lot of her political views. She is actually one of the first documented successful divorces in the United States. She is also someone that adamantly practiced dress reform because her father was such an avid reader of medical journals. He had been learning about what germs are and that women that are wearing petticoats and dresses as they're walking through fields or if they're walking through a barn that has animals being butchered, she's going to drag all of that into the house, right? The other aspect of it is that he refused to allow any of the women in his house to wear corsets, because he had been reading about the different complications that are coming from wearing this garment. So what the family started wearing is known as the bloomer outfit. It's a longer skirt that would come about halfway down the shin and then trousers underneath, right? She wore that up until the day she died, right? As she got older, it became much more masculine. She was wearing a tuxedo with tails by the end of her life. If she was going to a speaking engagement, she had a top hat, she had a cane, and she had white gloves. She also had her Medal of Honor on her chest, right? How did she receive the medal as a woman, right? That's crazy to think about. She's the only one. Well, as the war is kicking off, she immediately went to where the battles were taking place, and she wanted to volunteer her services as a surgeon, but she was denied because she was a woman. She was relegated to nurses' duties, which she happily performed some surgery on the side too. But that's just for her to keep her edge, right? Now, by the time the battles of Chattanooga are taking place, she is stopped off in D.C. She has signed a contract with the United States Army. She is now a contract surgeon for the United States Army. Now, while in Chattanooga, she is given jurisdiction of downtown, all the brick buildings that were confiscated by the United States Army to house all the wounded, right? Because when she got there, she didn't realize how bad the battles had been. And so all of the officers, the lower grade officers that might have been in the medical units in the downtown city were being pulled to take to the front, leaving her as an honorary first lieutenant to give orders and to conduct her rounds throughout the city. Now, She also had a habit of going across the lines to help aid any Confederate soldier or any civilians that needed medical attention. She wasn't going to let flags stop her from taking care of people, right? Now, unfortunately, she is captured on one of these trips, and she was acting as a spy on occasion. She had been delivering some information about what she had seen and heard while she was visiting and taking care of civilians. As she is captured, she is taken to Castle Thunder, where she's going to spend 6 months there as a prisoner. So malnourished after that time that she actually lost part of her eyesight, meaning she couldn't be a surgeon anymore. After she is released, which she was for a Confederate major who was a surgeon, this was something that delighted her until the day she died. Guesses. She was being equal to a major field. That meant a lot to her. Right? She's going to D.C. because she wants to get her pension paper. Actually, serve. She's from the United States Army. They could not pay her, but they would give her this new medal. Now, the Medal of Honor, it was still prestigious within the United States. It's something that was recognizable. That didn't use as a platform that which was she wanted to help, and that she used the medal to do it. Right? She was one of the hated suffered well. Heard speak and my radical. It was being heard duty service members in sustained combat for any length of time. The Telegram Medal of Honor to D.C. at her earliest convenience. The story goes is that she went to a local photo studio in New York where she wrapped up her tail and lying in a casket. And then D.C. Saying it without quite lovely, right? Just a year 1970s liberation movement is still pretty strong at that time, and President of women in and he uses Mary. She's not a Medal of Honor. He institutes a committee to go and find the evidence that they used against her and see if they can disprove that. And very all of the in the city that were being to she is now left with privates and corporals that she can order. She's giving orders as an officer, following them as if she is giving a lawful order. And go within the capacity of a unit officer. But the soldiers that she had treated and that she had operated on. You see, Mary was very much a holistic view. If you want to treat, if you get wounded in the amputation, limbs in Chattanooga, this saved my arm. I don't have to worry about my pant legs swinging when I get home. Like, that's where they wrote it down, and this family held on to it. So thankfully, Jimmy Carter was able to reinstate her medal in 1977. And it was always assumed that she was buried with her Medal of Honor because of the photograph story, but in reality, she wasn't. It wouldn't be until the mid-1980s that the family actually reveals that they never buried the medal with her, and they still have it. You can go see it. It is put on display in Oswego, New York at her family's museum, but it's not on display 100% of the time because there's still people to this day that threaten that medal, saying that she doesn't deserve it, that it should be taken away from her. Kind of an interesting opinion, I guess, is one way to look at it, right? But for this national story to keep going, we have to look at what we remember, right? So this is a picture of the Chattanooga National Cemetery. It's the second oldest national cemetery in the country behind Arlington. So this is where Grant's headquarters is up there on top of that hill where you see the flags. When the battles of Chattanooga are happening and the dead are being brought in by rail because the railroad goes right past the cemetery, he is wanting to watch over the burials, right? And these are the first instances of the Tennessee Valley Railroad in the 1870s and 80s issuing public history worksheets as you were riding the train. This is the first instance in where public history can evolve a little bit, right? It's no longer just signs or monuments that are being mounted. You get to drive past and you're getting a lesson of why these people are here, right? If it weren't for the Medal of Honor and those actions that are happening in and outside of Chattanooga, if that valor had not been shown, would Chattanooga have been, or Tennessee, been lost to the Confederacy forever? Now, the way we see the Medal of Honor today, that the Army Medal of Honor today is known as the Gillespie Medal of Honor. In 1895, there was actually a redesign of the Medal of Honor. They didn't redesign the symbols in themselves, they just changed the ribbon color. You see, after the Civil War, the GAR became very organized, and they were hosting reunions. They were issuing reunion medals. In fact, I believe some of their earliest meetings were talking about Confederate monuments being built, and they had some opinions on that. I urge everyone to go and read those because it's fun to read what those guys think about it because they fought for that. Now, I've lost my spot. So for the Gillespie Medal, oh, that's right. So these medals start looking very similar to the Medal of Honor, right? And you actually have some of the very earliest instances of quote unquote stolen valor, where guys that are just GAR members are receiving upgraded hotel rooms when they go on trips because someone that works at the hotel recognizes that may be a Medal of Honor. So in 1895, the United States decides they're going to change the ribbon to a red, blue, and white ribbon. The GAR said, just so there's no confusion at all, we're going to change the color of our ribbon too. It's going to be red, white, and blue. So since there was still confusion, the United States Army actually contracted one of its officers to go to Paris to find a jeweler to design a medal that could never be replicated without it actually being on purpose that it's a Medal of Honor, right? That's George Gillespie. He is a Tennessee Medal of Honor recipient. His action is in McMinn County in 1863. So he is the one that's responsible for how we see the Army Medal of Honor today. The blue ribbon is also his doing, and the other branches will adopt that. Now, granted, when he's designing the Army Medal of Honor, it's still just the Navy and the Army that have medals. Now, Marine Corps receives the Navy medal since they are a branch or a department of the Navy, men's department, right? That's always the joke, right? For any Marines or Navy in here. Sorry, poorly timed. So, but as we continue, you head into World War I with the Great Purge in 1917. You have Army officers in World War I looking for examples of valor that they can project. And there's a very famous Tennessean that got that role. That is Alvin York, right? Now, I have a very fun relationship with this man. I grew up in Murfreesboro. As Jeff stated earlier, my mom worked at the VA hospital for 36 years. So as a child, all the way through adulthood, I would see exhibits in the hospital about Alvin York. And I would always wonder, how did this man capture 132 guys, right? How did none of them jump him, right? Because the Germans, and as I got older going to Dr. Hunt's class and learning about, even at the end of World War I, the Germans were still radicalizing their officer class and their enlisted class to go to war to keep fighting. So how did that happen? Turns out he was on a patrol with 16 other men, right? There were 4 men that were killed in this action, 2 of which had Medal of Honor citations written for them, but they were actually never approved because General Lindsay didn't want to approve them. He wanted to approve York's because York was a conscientious objector before the war. He was a 31-year-old male with a 3rd grade education. When he's training to go to World War I, he said that he was convinced by his drill instructors to go and fight because they told him that if we didn't stop the Germans, they were going to destroy culture all over the world. Now, York even stated that he reluctantly agreed to this and felt that it would be responsible of him to go and try to stop it at least. Well, little did he know that in the Argonne he was going to become the poster child for the Medal of Honor, right? Now, York, the reason he is important as a Medal of Honor recipient, especially to the state of Tennessee, has nothing to do with his action. It has everything to do with what he did in the 20s and 30s and 40s. Now, when he came home, he oftentimes would talk with his family and suggest that he may have been duped into going to war. And the reason he felt that way is because he only had a 3rd grade education. He often worried that maybe if he had a better education, he would have been able to understand maybe there's another way we can go about this, right? So he turns his focus to using the medal as a platform to raise money, to build schools in the most rural parts of this state, to make sure that no child is ever that uneducated that they worry that they get duped into going to war. The biggest pushback that he got was in the early to mid 30s. It was actually by the America First Committee. The America First Committee at that time, their spokesperson was Charles Lindbergh, another Medal of Honor recipient. Now, York and Lindbergh would actually go after each other in editorials. And it's actually quite fascinating. York calls Lindbergh out and says, if our children hear this man, we will have war on our doorstep in no time. And of course, Lindbergh had sympathies with Germany. He had flown to Germany on several occasions. On one of them, he received an award from Hermann Goering. Now, he was according to him, at the time, he felt very like, but he took it anyway, right? Not to mention that one of the main financial backers of the America First Committee was Henry Ford. Dr. Seuss has a great cartoon, if you want to Google it, to help you understand how the America First Committee in the 30s, their agenda, their ideas. It's fun. Now, all that to say is that the national story continues. You have men like Paul Huff, America's first paratrooper to receive the Medal of Honor during World War II for actions in Italy. You have Desmond Doss, who is not a Tennessean, but he lived in the Chattanooga area for the last 35 years of his life. He was a Tennessean, right? He believed himself to be a Tennessean. Hero without a gun, right? Holding true to his integrity. Alexander Bonnyman. Bonnyman is a Knoxvillian. He didn't even have to fight. He was a 36-year-old man with 2 kids running his own copper mine operation out in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. A 36-year-old man enlisting into the United States Marine Corps. I didn't mean to say it again. I was just making sure that you heard me, right? Because the Marine Corps is one of the toughest outfits at that time. Now, he very quickly gets a battlefield commission after Guadalcanal. He will go on to become the first Medal of Honor recipient to have his action partially recorded. Because Norm Hatch, who's a documentarian who is documenting the island hopping campaigns of the Pacific, captured a portion of his action on film. It's wild, right? All the way to today, where you have men like Mitchell Stout in Vietnam who selflessly took a grenade that had been thrown into their bunker with 5 other men, held it to his chest, and walked out of the bunker. Calmly. The men that witnessed it said he had such a calm look on his face, as if he knew that that was it. There was nothing else after he walked out that door. But all of the recipients, right, when you're talking to them, they don't call themselves heroes for a very specific reason. There's a reason they call themselves recipients. They receive the medal, they are carriers of it, right? Because that medal goes to represent the other people that have never received any type of recognition for their service, right? It's not that they want to be seen or want to be recognized, but there's an understanding in our country that if you serve other people, that shows that you are secure enough in yourself that you don't have to worry about the other nonsense that goes on in the world, because you have a mission. You have something to take care of. And what is our mission that was set forth by Lincoln? To say, after he saved the nation by bringing the Union Army in, why do you think he called it the Union Army? We got to build a more perfect union, and the only way we're going to do that is together. Even through all of our differences, political, ideological, the only way it's going to work is together. And the recipients see that, right? Now in 2025 this year, later on this year in September, it's actually last week of September going into the first week of October, we are hosting the Medal of Honor celebration / convention. Now every year the Medal of Honor Society, which is all of the living recipients, will host a celebration / convention in a city in the United States. Thankfully this year we won that bid. Now, all 61 living recipients have been invited. We're expecting around 40 just because of age and health, but it's going to be a great time because guess what? We're actually, for the first time in history, we get to recreate Andrew's Raid. We are going to take the Medal of Honor recipients on a train ride that the railroad is actually giving us for the day. We get to use that rail line, which is usually used for shipping product north and south. We get to use it for fun and education, right? There's also going to be a lot of other different activities that are happening all throughout the city within the different communities. The recipients themselves don't want to be seen as people that come in and just receive gifts from a city. They want to be seen as a group of people that leave things with the city when they leave, right? They want to leave the city better than they found it. They want the communities to know that they don't want to take anything from them, right? So if there's any potential of interest and involvement in the celebration, please follow us on, follow our website, follow our social media. All of those things will be updated regularly. And in fact, the most recent update is that our MC for the week is going to be Gary Sinise. And the Lieutenant Dan Band is actually going to be headlining the gala, the Patriot Gala, that Friday night. Well, we're at 45 minutes. Do we have time? Do we want to take questions?
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'll give you the mic. That way our folks who are listening on our YouTube Live can hear the audio. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, just raise your hand. I'll get you the mic.
Hi. So you mentioned that Washington had the
Badge of Military Merit.
yeah.
Yes.
What about the War of 1812 and the Spanish Merit? Nothing. I mean the
The Certificate of Merit was what was eligible to service members at that time.
Okay.
So that was the only award.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I did that well, huh? Oh. Okay.
Thank you for that. Can you show the photo of the cemetery again? Yeah. I'm proud to point out that I have relatives, my own father's buried just to the right of that photo. And Desmond Doss is up to the right on the hill there, and I have a cousin who was part of his honor guard when he was interred there. So
Wow.
Just
Yeah,
thought
there are currently 9 Medal of Honor recipients that are buried at the cemetery. Larry Taylor being the most recent. He was Tennessee's most recent Medal of Honor recipient back in 23. He is actually off to the right here.
it's a fascinating place.
Yeah, there's just a fun little note. Erwin Rommel's second in command in Africa is also buried here. Because he was captured in North Africa during Operation Torch. He was brought back to Camp Forest, Tennessee as a prisoner of war. And he will pass away, and when he does, they bury him in Chattanooga.
Any other questions?
I'm an Aquarius. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, thank y'all again so much for coming out and listening, and thank you, Stephen, for coming out and talking to us about the Medal of Honor and its ties to Tennessee history. So be sure to come next week. We will have, our speaker will be Sam Elliott, not that Sam Elliott. Next month. Next month. Sorry about that. Next month. Our speaker will be Sam Elliott. He'll be kind of talking about some of the perspective from some of the commanders at Spring Hill. So feel free to come and check that out. If you expecting to see General Buford here when you come, I'm sorry, it's not that Sam Elliott, just to confirm that. But thank y'all again so much for coming out. We really do appreciate it. Look forward to see y'all in the next one.
Thank y'all.